The lawyer's folder hit the table with a soft thud that somehow sounded like thunder in my ears. Inside were photos, text messages, bank statements, everything I thought I'd hidden so carefully. Ben sat across from me, calm as ever, while my world crumbled. How had the man I'd been calling weak and boring for months just destroyed my entire life without raising his voice once? I always knew I was too good for Ben Fenwick. Standing in our suburban kitchen that Tuesday morning, watching him fumble with his coffee maker in that pathetic way of his, I felt that familiar surge of superiority. At 32, I still turned heads at the office while he looked every bit the boring middle school teacher he was. "You were out late again last night," Ben said quietly, not meeting my eyes. His voice had that defeated tone that usually made me roll my eyes, but today it annoyed me more than usual. "I told you the Henderson project is demanding. Some of us have real careers, Ben." I smoothed my skirt and checked my reflection in the microwave door. Perfect, as always. Not everyone gets summers off to play with finger paints. He flinched at that. Good. Maybe it would motivate him to actually do something with his life instead of grading papers and coming home to watch documentaries like some elderly man. "I just worry about you driving so late. Maybe I could pick you up." "God, Ben, you're so paranoid." I grabbed my purse, making sure my phone was buried deep inside. The last thing I needed was him seeing Eli's good morning text. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I've been doing it long before you came along." That wasn't entirely true, but Ben didn't need to know that. He also didn't need to know that the Henderson project had wrapped up 2 weeks ago, or that my late nights were spent in Eli Keating's apartment, finally experiencing what passion actually felt like. 7-year-old Sophie wandered into the kitchen, her blonde hair messy from sleep. She looked between Ben and me with those big eyes that seemed to see too much for a kid her age. "Are you fighting again?" she asked quietly. "We're not fighting, sweetheart," I said, softening my voice. "Mommy and Daddy are just talking about work stuff. Boring grown-up things." Ben knelt down to Sophie's level, his whole face changing. This was the one thing I couldn't criticize him for. He was genuinely good with our daughter. "Hey, princess, want me to make you pancakes before school? Can they be shaped like butterflies?" "Of course they can." I watched this exchange with mixed feelings. Ben's devotion to Sophie was sweet, I supposed, but it also highlighted how ordinary he was. Eli would never spend his morning making butterfly pancakes. Eli had ambition, drive, excitement. He made me feel alive in ways Ben never had. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out just enough to see Eli's name on the screen, then quickly shoved it back in my purse. But not before I caught Ben's reflection in the window behind me, watching my every move. "I have to go," I announced. "Big presentation today." Another lie. Today was actually pretty light, which meant more time to text with Eli and maybe grab lunch together. The thought made me smile as I headed for the door. "Lira," Ben called after me. Something in his tone made me pause. "We should talk, really talk, soon." I turned back, studying his face. There was something different there, something harder than usual. For a second, I felt a flicker of unease. Then I remembered who I was dealing with. This was Ben, sweet, passive, doormat Ben, who wouldn't hurt a fly. "Sure, honey, when I have time." I gave him my brightest smile. "You know how important my work is." The drive to the office gave me time to think about my situation. Yes, I was married to Ben, but that didn't mean I had to settle for his mediocrity forever. I deserved passion, excitement, a man who could match my energy and ambition. Eli understood that. He appreciated what Ben took for granted. I wasn't doing anything wrong, really. I was just exploring my options. Ben should be grateful I hadn't left him yet. Where would he be without me? Still living in his parents' basement, probably, grading papers and wondering why no woman would give him a second look. The office building came into view, and my pulse quickened. Eli's car was already in the parking lot. I checked my makeup in the rearview mirror, applied a fresh coat of lip gloss, and prepared to start my real day. Ben could make his butterfly pancakes and grade his little tests. I had more important things to do. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt like ascending to heaven. I'd been working at Morrison & Associates for 3 years, but everything had changed 6 months ago when Eli Keating joined our marketing team. Tall, confident, with dark hair and the kind of smile that made women forget their own names. He was everything Ben wasn't. "Morning, beautiful." Eli's voice came from behind me as I settled at my desk. I turned to find him leaning against my cubicle wall, coffee in hand and that devastating grin on his face. "Good morning yourself," I replied, making sure to keep my voice low. The office wasn't exactly small, and gossip traveled fast. "Sleep well?" "Would have slept better with company." His eyes sparkled with mischief. "But I suppose some of us have obligations." The way he said obligations made my stomach flutter. He never pushed, never demanded more than I could give. He understood that my situation was complicated, and he respected that. Unlike Ben, who seemed to expect my undivided attention just because we shared a mortgage. "Lira," my friend Jessica bounced over, her blonde ponytail swinging. "Girl, you look amazing. That color is perfect on you." I smoothed my emerald blouse, pleased. I'd chosen it specifically because Eli had mentioned green was his favorite color. "Thanks, Jess. I felt like trying something new." "Speaking of new," Jessica lowered her voice and glanced around conspiratorially, "there are some interesting rumors floating around about you and a certain someone." Her eyes flicked meaningfully toward Eli's office. My blood went cold. "Rumors? What kind of rumors?" "Oh, you know how people talk. Someone saw you two at that little Italian place on 5th Street last week, looking very cozy." Damn, I'd thought we'd been careful about that lunch. "We were discussing the Morrison account. It's called networking, Jess." "Hey, I'm not judging," Jessica held up her hands. "If I was stuck married to someone as boring as Ben, I might do some networking myself." The casual dismissal of my husband should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I felt validated. Even Jessica could see what I'd been dealing with for years. Ben was boring. He was safe and predictable, and completely lacking in the qualities that made life worth living. "It's not like that," I lied smoothly. "But you're right about Ben. Sometimes I wonder what I was thinking." "You were young," Jessica said sympathetically. "We all make mistakes. The question is, what are you going to do about it now?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Ben. "Hope you have a great day. Love you." I stared at the message, feeling a mix of guilt and irritation. He was trying so hard to be the perfect husband, but his efforts only highlighted how little he understood about what I actually wanted. Love wasn't enough. I needed excitement, passion, someone who could challenge me intellectually and emotionally. "Everything okay?" Eli had appeared beside my desk again, his voice gentle with concern. "Just the usual," I said, quickly deleting Ben's message. "Nothing important." Eli's hand brushed mine as he reached for a file on my desk. The contact sent electricity up my arm. "You know, I was thinking about that conversation we had yesterday, about feeling trapped in situations that don't serve us anymore." I remembered. We'd been talking about career advancement, but the subtext had been clear. Both of us felt constrained by circumstances beyond our control. His recent divorce, my marriage to Ben. "I've been thinking about it too," I admitted. "Maybe we should continue that discussion over dinner tonight. I know a quiet place outside town." My heart raced. This would be our first real dinner date, not just grabbed lunches or coffee meetings. It felt like a significant step, and I found myself nodding before I'd fully thought it through. "I'll have to tell Ben I'm working late again." "Will he believe it?" I almost laughed. "Ben believes whatever I tell him. He's not exactly the suspicious type." Something flickered across Eli's face. Surprise, maybe, or disapproval. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "I'll pick you up at 7, he said. "Wear something nice." As he walked away, I felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with nervous energy. This was really happening. I was finally taking control of my life, pursuing what I deserved instead of settling for what was safe. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Ben. "Don't forget Sophie has her school play tomorrow. She's been practicing her lines all week." Guilt stabbed through me. I had forgotten about the play. Between work and Eli and managing my increasingly complicated double life, I'd been distracted lately, but that wasn't my fault. If Ben were more interesting, more engaging, I wouldn't need to look elsewhere for stimulation. I quickly typed back, "Of course I remember. Wouldn't miss it." Another lie, but a small one. I'd make it up to Sophie somehow. Maybe take her shopping this weekend, buy her something special. Children were resilient. They adapted. And in the long run, wouldn't she be better off seeing her mother happy and fulfilled rather than trapped in a loveless marriage? The rest of the day passed in a blur of anticipation. I found myself checking my reflection in every mirror, adjusting my hair, refreshing my lipstick. By 5 o'clock, I was practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Hot date tonight?" Jessica asked with a knowing smile. "Something like that," I replied, grabbing my purse. As I headed for the elevator, I caught sight of Eli through his office window. He was on the phone, but he looked up and winked at me. My stomach did a little flip. This was my life now. Excitement, passion, possibility. Everything I'd been missing with Ben was finally within reach. I just had to be brave enough to take it. 3 weeks later, I was planning Ben's 35th birthday party with the enthusiasm of someone organizing a funeral. He'd mentioned wanting something small and quiet, typical Ben, but I'd already invited both sets of parents and a few friends. If I had to suffer through celebrating another year of his mundane existence, at least I could make it interesting. "Are you sure about the restaurant?" Ben asked for the 3rd time that morning. "We could just do something at home." "Nonsense," I said, applying mascara in the bathroom mirror. "You only turned 35 once. Besides, Romano's has that private dining room. It'll be perfect." What I didn't mention was that Romano's was also where Eli and I had shared our first real kiss 2 weeks ago. The irony of celebrating my boring husband's birthday in the same place where I'd found actual passion was too delicious to resist. Ben's mother, Carol, arrived early to help set up. She was a stern woman in her 60s who'd never quite approved of me, though she tried to hide it for Ben's sake. Today, her disapproval was barely concealed. "You look nice, dear," she said in that tone that suggested I looked anything but nice. "Very festive." I was wearing a red dress that Eli had complimented just yesterday. It was perhaps a bit much for a family dinner, but I felt confident and attractive in it, something I rarely felt around Ben anymore. "Thank you, Carol. I wanted tonight to be special." "I'm sure you did." Her eyes were cold. "Ben's been looking forward to this. He's been so stressed lately. Problems at work, I think." I knew Ben had been quiet and withdrawn recently, but I'd assumed it was just his usual midlife crisis nonsense. He was probably realizing what I'd known for years, that his life was painfully ordinary. "He's fine," I said dismissively. "Just needs to learn to handle pressure better." Carol's expression hardened. "My son handles pressure just fine, Lira. The question is what's causing it." Before I could respond, Ben appeared in the doorway. "Mum, could you help me with something in the kitchen?" They disappeared together, leaving me to finish getting ready. Through the thin walls, I could hear Carol's voice, urgent and concerned, though I couldn't make out the words. Ben's responses were too quiet to hear. When they returned, Ben looked troubled, and Carol looked like she wanted to say something but was holding back. The tension was palpable. "Everything okay?" I asked sweetly. "Perfect," Ben said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. The restaurant was crowded when we arrived. I'd specifically requested the table near the window, the same one where Eli and I had sat during our last lunch date. The memory made me smile as we settled in with our guests. Ben's father Martin was trying to keep the conversation light, asking about work and Sophie's school activities. My sister Jenna had come with her latest boyfriend, and my mother Helen was fussing over Sophie like she always did. "So, Ben," Jenna said, raising her wine glass, 35. "How does it feel to be officially middle-aged?" Ben forced a laugh. "About the same as 34, honestly." "That's the problem with men your age," I said, taking a generous sip of wine. "No ambition, no drive to improve themselves." The table went quiet. Carol's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Lira," my mother said gently, "maybe we should—" "No, it's fine," I continued, feeling emboldened by the wine and the thrill of my secret life with Eli. "I'm just saying, some people are content to coast through life while others—" I let the sentence hang, smiling mysteriously. "Others what?" Carol's voice was sharp. "Others seek out more stimulating company." I looked directly at Ben. "You know, people with energy, passion, actual conversation skills." Ben's face had gone pale. "Lira, please." But I was just getting started. The wine, the location, the frustration of months of pretending to be the dutiful wife. It all came bubbling up. "I mean, let's be honest," I said, my voice getting louder. "When was the last time you surprised me, Ben? When was the last time you made my heart race? Some people just don't have much stamina." "Right, Ben." The silence was deafening. Sophie was staring at her plate, looking confused and upset. Martin was clearing his throat uncomfortably. Carol looked like she wanted to throw her drink at me. "That's enough," Ben said quietly. "Is it?" I was on a roll now, thinking about Eli's hands on my skin, his whispered promises, the way he made me feel alive. Because I've been thinking lately about what I've been missing, what I deserve. There are men out there who know how to treat a woman, who know how to make her feel special. "Lira." Ben's voice was warning now, but I ignored it. "In fact," I said, raising my glass with a bright smile, "I was just thinking, maybe I should have let Eli blow out my candles instead." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Carol dropped her fork with a clatter. Jenna's mouth fell open. My mother looked horrified. Ben stood up slowly, his face completely white. Without a word, he pulled out his wallet, dropped several bills on the table, and walked away. He left his unopened birthday gift sitting there like an accusation. "Ben," I called after him, suddenly realizing I'd gone too far. "Ben, wait!" But he was already gone. The table erupted in chaos. Carol was on her feet, her face flushed with anger. "How dare you," she hissed, "how dare you humiliate my son like that on his birthday?" "It was just a joke," I protested, but even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. "A joke?" Martin's voice was incredulous. "You just admitted to an affair in front of his entire family." "I didn't admit to anything," I said defensively. "I just said, 'We all know what you said,'" Carol snapped, "and we all know what you meant. You disgust me." She stormed out, Martin close behind her. Sophie was crying now, and my mother was trying to comfort her while shooting me looks of pure disappointment. "Lira," Jenna said quietly, "what the hell was that?" I looked around the table at the wreckage of what was supposed to be a simple birthday dinner. The other diners were staring, some with phones out, probably recording the whole thing for social media. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt a flicker of doubt. Had I really just destroyed my marriage in front of my entire family? Over what? A man who'd never even said he loved me. But then I thought about Ben's pale, defeated face as he walked away, and I felt that familiar surge of superiority. If he couldn't handle the truth about what our marriage really was, that was his problem, not mine. I deserved better than this. I deserved passion and excitement, and a man who could actually satisfy me, even if it meant burning everything else to the ground. Ben didn't come home that night, or the next night. When he finally returned on Sunday evening, he moved through our house like a ghost, collecting clothes and toiletries with mechanical precision. He'd been staying at his parents' house, Sophie told me, sleeping in his old room like a teenager who'd been grounded. "This is ridiculous," I said, following him into our bedroom. "You're seriously going to throw a tantrum over a stupid joke?" He didn't respond, just continued folding clothes into a suitcase I didn't recognize. His movements were calm, deliberate, which somehow made me angrier than if he'd been yelling. "Ben, I'm talking to you." "I heard you." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm just trying to figure out what there is to say." "How about I'm sorry for overreacting? How about I understand you were just having fun?" I sat on the bed, trying to look contrite. "Everyone knew it was a joke. You're the only one taking it seriously." He finally looked at me, and something in his eyes made me take a step back. I'd never seen Ben look at me like that before, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time and didn't like what he found. "A joke," he repeated slowly. "You humiliated me in front of our daughter, our parents, our friends, and you think it was a joke. It wasn't that bad. You told everyone at my birthday dinner that you're sleeping with someone else." His voice was still quiet, but there was steel underneath it. "You said his name, Lira. You said you wished he was there instead of me." Put like that, it did sound worse than I'd intended, but he was still overreacting. "Look, maybe I had too much wine. Maybe I said things I shouldn't have. But you're acting like I actually did something wrong." "Didn't you?" The question hung between us. I thought about Eli's apartment, about the afternoons we'd spent together, about the lies I'd been telling for months. But that wasn't the point. The point was that Ben was supposed to fight for me, not run away like a wounded child. "I think you should sleep in the guest room until you can be rational about this," I said finally. Ben laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not sleeping anywhere in this house, Lira. I'll be at my parents' until I figure out what comes next." "What comes next?" Fear flickered through me. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I need time to think. About us, about our marriage, about whether there's anything left worth saving." He was bluffing. He had to be. This was Ben, safe, predictable Ben, who'd never made a major decision without consulting me first. He wouldn't actually leave. Where would he go? What would he do? He needed me more than I needed him. "Fine," I said, crossing my arms. "Take your time. Sulk at Mommy and Daddy's house. But don't expect me to wait around forever while you figure out how to be a man." Something shifted in his expression. For just a moment, he looked like he might say something cutting, something that would actually hurt. Then the moment passed, and he went back to packing. "Sophie's confused," he said quietly. "She keeps asking why Daddy's not coming home, why Mommy made everyone upset at the restaurant." Guilt twisted in my stomach. "I'll talk to her." "Will you? Will you explain to our 7-year-old daughter why you thought it was funny to tell everyone about your affair?" "I never said I was having an affair." "You didn't have to." He zipped up the suitcase and headed for the door. "The whole table knew exactly what you meant. Hell, half the restaurant probably figured it out." After he left, I found myself alone in our too-quiet house. Sophie was at my mother's for the night. "To give you 2 time to work things out," Mom had said with that disappointed tone I was getting tired of hearing. I poured myself a glass of wine and tried to process what had just happened. Ben was being dramatic, obviously. He'd cool off in a few days and realize he was being ridiculous. We'd been married for 8 years. He wasn't going to throw that away over one embarrassing dinner. My phone buzzed with a text from Eli. "Hey, beautiful. Heard there was some drama at a birthday party this weekend. You okay?" I stared at the message, wondering how he'd heard. Then I remembered Jessica had been at Romano's that night with her husband. Office gossip traveled fast. I typed back, "Just some family drama, nothing I can't handle." "Want to talk about it? I could come over." The offer was tempting. After the stress of the weekend, I could use some comfort, some reminder of why I'd been willing to risk everything in the first place. But having Eli in the house Ben had just stormed out of felt wrong somehow. "Rain check. This week has been crazy." "Of course. Take care of yourself, gorgeous." I set the phone aside and wandered through the empty house. In Sophie's room, I found drawings she'd made at school. Stick figures labeled Mommy, Daddy, and me, all holding hands under a smiling sun. The sight made my chest tight. Maybe I'd gone too far at the restaurant. Maybe I could have handled things more discreetly. But that didn't change the fundamental problem. I was married to a man who bored me to tears, who couldn't give me what I needed emotionally or physically. Ben would get over it. He always did. And if he didn't, well, maybe that would be for the best. Maybe it was time to stop pretending our marriage was something it wasn't. I finished my wine and went to bed alone, telling myself I was fine with that. But as I lay in the dark, I couldn't shake the image of Ben's face when I'd mentioned Eli's name. I'd never seen him look so hurt, so betrayed. For the first time since this whole thing started, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. But it was too late to take it back now. The week that followed was the longest of my life. Ben maintained his silence, communicating only through brief texts about Sophie's schedule and household logistics. When he came to pick up our daughter for his days, he was polite but distant, like I was a stranger he was forced to interact with. I threw myself into work, spending long hours at the office, and even longer lunches with Eli. But even his attention couldn't completely distract me from the growing sense that my life was spiraling out of control. "You seem distracted," Eli said over coffee Thursday afternoon. We were at our usual spot, a little cafe across town, where we were unlikely to run into anyone we knew. "Just family stuff," I said, stirring my latte absently. "Ben's being dramatic about the whole birthday thing." "Dramatic how?" I realized I'd been vague about the details with Eli. He knew there'd been a confrontation, but I hadn't told him exactly what I'd said. The truth was, I was starting to feel embarrassed about my outburst. "He's staying at his parents' house, acting like I committed some terrible crime, all because I made a few jokes he didn't appreciate." Eli was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "What kind of jokes?" "Nothing serious, just, marriage humor, complaints about his lack of excitement in certain areas." I forced a laugh. I might have mentioned that some men know how to treat a woman properly. "Lira," Eli's voice was careful, "please tell me you didn't mention me specifically." My silence was answer enough. His face went pale. "Jesus Christ, Lira, you told your husband about us? In public?" "It wasn't like that," I protested. "I just said your name. I didn't give details or anything." "You said my name." He ran his hands through his hair, looking genuinely upset. "At his birthday party, in front of his family. Why are you acting like this is such a big deal? You said you wanted us to be able to be open about our relationship." "I said that when I thought you were going to leave him," Eli said sharply. "I never said anything about humiliating the guy in front of his entire family. That's not how decent people handle these situations." "Decent people." The phrase stung more than it should have. "So now I'm not decent. I'm saying this is messier than I signed up for." He was already reaching for his jacket. "I think we need to take a break while you figure out your marriage situation." "Eli, wait." But he was already walking away, leaving me sitting alone with 2 half-empty coffee cups and the growing realization that I'd miscalculated everything. That evening, I tried calling my sister for support, but even Jenna seemed distant. "I don't know what you want me to say, Lira," she said when I explained about Eli's reaction. "You kind of nuked your life last weekend. People are talking." "People are always talking. Since when do you care what other people think?" "Since you made a spectacle of yourself in front of half the town. Jessica posted about it on Facebook, you know. The whole thing's become this cautionary tale about cheating wives." My blood went cold. "She posted what?" "Nothing specific, just some vague stuff about watching someone destroy their marriage in real time and feeling sorry for the husband and daughter. But everyone knows she was talking about you." I hung up and immediately checked Facebook. Sure enough, Jessica's post was there, and while she hadn't mentioned names, the comments made it clear that our entire social circle knew exactly what she was referring to. Words like shameless and disgusting and poor Ben filled the thread. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Lira, honey, we need to talk. If this is about the Facebook thing, it's about Sophie. She's been asking questions. Difficult questions about why Daddy's so sad, why people at school are looking at her funny." My stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "She wanted to know if you and Daddy are getting divorced. She wanted to know if she did something wrong." Mom's voice was heavy with disappointment. I told her of course not, that grown-ups sometimes have problems, but it's never the children's fault. "But Lira, what am I supposed to tell her when she asks if Mommy loves Daddy anymore?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what I'd done settling on my shoulders. In my pursuit of excitement and validation, I'd forgotten about the most important person in all of this. Sophie didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of my midlife crisis. "I never meant for any of this to happen," I whispered, "but it did happen, and now you need to figure out how to fix it, for Sophie's sake, if not your own." After Mom hung up, I sat in my empty house and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. A week ago, I'd felt powerful, in control, like I was finally taking charge of my life. Now I was alone. My affair partner wanted nothing to do with me. My friends were gossiping about me online, and my daughter was suffering because of choices I'd made. Maybe I could fix this. Maybe I could apologize to Ben, convince him to come home, find a way to rebuild what I'd broken. It would mean giving up Eli, giving up the excitement and passion I'd finally found, but maybe that was the price I had to pay. I picked up my phone to call Ben, then set it down again. What would I say? How do you apologize for something like this? How do you take back words that revealed the truth about what you really thought of your marriage? The silence in the house was deafening. Every room held memories of the life I'd taken for granted. Sophie's drawings on the refrigerator, Ben's reading glasses on the nightstand, the family photos lining the hallway. I'd walked past these things every day without really seeing them, too focused on what I thought was missing to appreciate what I actually had. I drafted a dozen texts to Ben, deleting each one. "I'm sorry" seemed inadequate. "I didn't mean it" was a lie. I had meant it, at least in that moment of anger and frustration. "Please come back" sounded desperate and selfish, which is exactly what I'd become. My phone rang. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought it might be Ben. Instead, it was Eli. "Hey, beautiful. How'd the confrontation go? Did you finally tell Ben you're done?" His casual tone, the way he assumed I'd simply end my marriage like cancelling a subscription, made something click into place. This wasn't love. This wasn't even really about Eli. It was about me running from responsibilities, from the hard work of maintaining a real relationship, from the person I'd promised to be when I married Ben. "I can't do this anymore," I said quietly. "What? Can't do what?" "This, us, whatever this is." There was a pause. "You're kidding, right? After everything we've risked?" "I risked everything. You risked nothing." The clarity of it was almost painful. "You get to go home to your apartment with no responsibilities, no consequences. I'm the one who destroyed my family." "Come on, don't be dramatic. You were unhappy anyway." "I was bored," I interrupted. "There's a difference." And I confused boredom with unhappiness because it was easier than putting in the work to feel alive in my own life. "So what? You're crawling back to boring Ben now?" The contempt in his voice made me realize how many times I'd laughed along when he'd mocked my husband. How many times I'd participated in tearing down the man who'd been faithful to me, who'd built a life with me, who'd never once made me feel as cheap as I felt right now. "Goodbye, Eli." I hung up before he could respond, then blocked his number. It didn't make me feel better, but it felt like the first honest thing I'd done in months. Outside, I could hear our neighbor mowing his lawn, the sound of normal suburban life continuing around me. Inside, I sat in the wreckage of the life I'd built and wondered if it was too late to save any of it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Carol. Ben won't be coming by the house anymore." If you need to arrange something with Sophie, you can call me. Even Ben's mother was cutting me out now. The woman who'd always been politely cold to me was now actively hostile, and I couldn't blame her. I'd humiliated her son in the most public way possible. As I sat there in the growing darkness, I realized that for the first time in months, I had no idea what came next. The lawyer's office was nothing like I'd expected. I'd imagined something dramatic. Dark wood paneling, intimidating law books, the kind of setting you'd see in a movie. Instead, it was all beige carpet and fluorescent lighting, with motivational posters about family values and new beginnings on the walls. Ben was already there when I arrived, sitting across from a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He looked different, calmer somehow, more composed than I'd seen him in years. Mrs. Fenwick, the lawyer, Ms. Rodriguez, according to the nameplate, gestured to the chair across from Ben. "Please, have a seat." I sat down carefully, smoothing my skirt and trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "I'm not sure why we need lawyers involved. This is just a misunderstanding between my husband and me." "Is it?" Ms. Rodriguez opened a folder on her desk. "Mr. Fenwick has provided some concerning documentation about the state of your marriage. I thought it would be best if we discussed everything openly." "Documentation?" I looked at Ben, who was studying his hands. "What kind of documentation?" Instead of answering, Ms. Rodriguez slid a photograph across the desk. It was me and Eli leaving his apartment building, his hand on the small of my back, both of us laughing at something he'd said. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 weeks ago. "Where did you get this?" I demanded. "Mr. Fenwick hired a private investigator after your revelation at his birthday party," Ms. Rodriguez explained. "He wanted to understand the full scope of the situation before making any decisions about your marriage." She slid more photos across the desk. Me and Eli at Romano's. Me and Eli at the coffee shop. Me and Eli in the parking lot of his apartment complex, kissing like teenagers. "Ben," I said, my voice shaking, "you had me followed." He finally looked up, and his eyes were strangers' eyes. Cold, distant, completely unlike the man I'd married. I had to know the truth, all of it. "But these are private moments." "Private moments that occurred during your marriage," Ms. Rodriguez interrupted. "Mr. Fenwick also has documentation of financial irregularities, unexplained charges on credit cards, cash withdrawals that don't match your stated activities." More papers appeared on the desk. Bank statements, credit card bills, all highlighting charges I'd forgotten about. Dinners with Eli, hotels for our afternoon meetings, gifts I'd bought for him with money from our joint account. "You've been stealing from our family to fund your affair," Ben said quietly. "Money that was supposed to go toward Sophie's college fund, toward our mortgage payments." "I wasn't stealing," I protested. "It's my money too. I have a right to spend it." "On another man?" Ms. Rodriguez's voice was sharp. "Using family resources to conduct an extramarital affair could be considered financial infidelity, Mrs. Fenwick. In custody proceedings, that doesn't look good." Custody proceedings. The words hit me like a physical blow. "You want to take Sophie away from me?" "I want to protect my daughter," Ben said, "from the chaos you've created, from the gossip and speculation that's following her everywhere she goes." "I'm her mother. You're also the person who announced your affair at a public restaurant, who's been lying to our family for months, who's been using our daughter's college money to buy gifts for your boyfriend." Ben's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it. "Tell me, Lira, when's the last time you picked Sophie up from school? When's the last time you helped her with homework or asked about her day?" I opened my mouth to answer, then realized I couldn't. Between work and Eli and managing my double life, I'd been distracted, but that didn't make me a bad mother. "I've been busy. You've been busy having an affair." Ms. Rodriguez consulted her notes. "According to Mr. Fenwick's documentation, you've missed 3 parent-teacher conferences, 2 school plays, and Sophie's last doctor's appointment. When questioned, you told your husband you were working late, but your office confirmed you'd left early on all those days. The walls felt like they were closing in. This is insane. You can't just take my daughter away because I made some mistakes. We're not taking her away, Ben said. We're proposing a custody arrangement that prioritizes her stability and well-being. Weekends with you, weekdays with me and my parents, where she can have consistent care and won't have to worry about overhearing conversations about Mommy's boyfriend. Eli's not... I started, then stopped. What was Eli, exactly? He'd made it clear he wanted nothing to do with me after the birthday disaster. I'd destroyed my marriage for a man who'd walked away the moment things got complicated. Ms. Rodriguez slid another document across the desk. This is a proposed separation agreement. Mr. Fenwick keeps the house. He'll need the stability for Sophie's sake. You'll receive your portion of the other assets, minus what you spent on the affair, which will be reimbursed to the joint account. I stared at the papers, the legal language blurring together. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious, Ben said. You made your choice, Lira. You chose Eli over our family. Now you get to live with the consequences. But what about counseling? What about trying to work things out? I was grasping at straws now, desperate to find some way to undo what I'd done. You humiliated me in front of our daughter, Ben said simply. You spent months lying to my face, stealing from our family, putting our child at risk of exposure to God knows what. Why would I want to work that out? I looked around the sterile office, at the papers documenting my betrayal, at the man I'd married looking at me like I was a stranger. 6 months ago, I'd felt trapped in a boring marriage with a boring man. Now I was losing everything. My husband, my home, my daughter's daily presence in my life. I never meant for any of this to happen, I whispered. But it did happen, Ms. Rodriguez said gently. The question now is whether you're going to sign this agreement voluntarily or whether we need to proceed with a contested divorce. I thought about fighting, about hiring my own lawyer, about dragging this out in court. But what would I be fighting for? A marriage I'd already destroyed? The right to continue lying and cheating and hurting the people who'd loved me? With shaking hands, I reached for the pen. As I signed my name on document after document, I caught sight of Ben's face. There was no triumph there, no satisfaction in his victory, just sadness and resignation, like he was mourning something that had died a long time ago. When it was over, he stood up and shook hands with Ms. Rodriguez. Thank you for your help with this. Mr. Fenwick, she said, I hope you and Sophie can find some peace now. We will, he said confidently. We're going to be just fine. As he headed for the door, I called after him. Ben, wait. Can we talk? Just for a minute? He paused, his hand on the doorknob. For a moment, I thought he might turn around, might give me one last chance to explain or apologize, or somehow make this right. Instead, he walked out without looking back. I sat alone in the lawyer's office, surrounded by the paperwork that had just dismantled my life, and finally understood what I'd lost. Not just a marriage, but a family. Not just a husband, but the respect of everyone who'd ever cared about me. I'd gotten exactly what I thought I wanted, freedom from my boring life with boring Ben. The problem was, I'd never stopped to consider what that freedom would actually cost. Now I knew,